Alright, what's going on, you guys? Nick here with Nick Strength and Power. I've got a couple of interesting stories for you guys today. The first story that I've got for you guys today. Terrence Ruffin, Ruff Diesel. We haven't talked about him in a while because he effectively took off the year of 2024 from competing. But in his most recent post on Instagram, he announced that he's back. He's beginning his prep for the Pittsburgh Pro in Classic Physique, of course. In this video that you're watching right now, he's weighing 207 pounds. He says his last competition weight was 169 pounds. So he's 40 plus pounds, or about 40 pounds heavier than that in this video. And he says his competition cutoff is either 187 or 182. And I believe he put either or because it depends on how high he measures in at. I think it was actually Terrence that I heard talking about this. Like, depending on how depleted they are when they go to weigh-ins and get their height measured, like the fat pads on the bottom of their feet could, like, make the difference of that extra half inch. So I think that's why Terrence is saying either or. I believe it was him that I heard talking about having different heights at different points in his career just because of that. But in any case, the cutoff weight for him would be in the 180s, and he's 207 here. And he really kind of talks about in this caption how rough 2024 was for him. He says it didn't go exactly how he planned as far as using it for an off season. And he said he felt like all of 2024 he was just surviving and he wants to get back to thriving. Now, Terrence could be a very interesting character for us to talk about in 2024, considering the fact that throughout Chris Bumstead's reign, which we are now starting a new chapter, the Olympia title is vacant this year. But Terrence was one of the rivals that Chris had that was a top 2 contender that I feel like a lot of people stood a really good opposition to Chris. First there was Breon, then there was Terrence, like right in the middle of Chris's reign. And then it was Ramon, and now it was Mike Sommerfeld. So that means there's only 3 of those 4 guys that still remain in Classic Physique that stood toe-to-toe with Chris Bumstead in a top 2 position now that Breon has formally announced he's going to 212 for sure. And Terrence is one of those 3 guys. So in the absence of Chris Bumstead, and we've had this conversation quite a bit, who's going to be the guy that could take that vacant throne? And even though it feels like Terrence has been out of the conversation for a little while now, his last Olympia appearance in 2023, he placed 5th, and we haven't obviously really talked about him much in 2024 considering he was taking that time off. While I watch this update from Terrence, I kind of think about why not Terrence? Why couldn't it be him? I still feel like as far as posing routines, Terrence is still one of the best, if not the best, in the entire IFBB across the board. As far as a guy that really embodies some of those key characteristics that Classic Physique seems to be about, why couldn't Terrence be that guy? Why couldn't he bounce back from 5th place in 2023? It's not like he's past his prime. He's still a young guy. And if you think about all the guys that are at the top right now, all the guys that are kind of in this conversation to potentially be the next Chris Bumstead, Terrence has beaten all of them at one point or another in his career. If you're talking about Ramon, if you're talking about Mike, if you're talking about even Breon, even though he's out, Terrence has beaten all these guys. Wesley, Michael DeBoule. What's stopping Terrence from coming back and doing that again? Now, obviously, and maybe fairly so, bodybuilding kind of has this short-term memory thing where you're only as good as your last time on stage, and that's what people have in the back of their minds when they talk about you, and that's what people think about when it comes to the future of your career, is you're only as good as your last appearance, your last show, your last placing. And I feel like with Terrence, that's kind of what has been applied to him. But I'm looking at this physique update. Terrence still looks fantastic to me. His physique is what Classic Physique is really all about, especially for a shorter guy. I feel like he really embodies that classic look. And again, with his posing, he's a guy that really knows how to present his physique to the best of his ability. So I say all that to say I'm very eagerly anticipating seeing Terrence on stage in Pittsburgh. I know it's going to be a big show. I know it's going to be an important show for Terrence as far as he does need to requalify for the Olympia. He's not currently qualified. And I feel like in the context of that whole you're only as good as your last show thing, I think he also wants to make a statement in Pittsburgh and say, look, I'm back. You should be thinking about me. You should be talking about me going into the Olympia this year. And I've always been a fan of Terrence's physique, so I'm cautiously optimistic that he could achieve that. Like I said earlier, why not? But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about the return of Terrence Ruffin, this latest physique update, his chances at the Olympia now in the absence of Chris Bumstead. What do you guys think in the comments down below? Now, next up in the news, in the same vein as that first story, we did get another physique update from Chris Bumstead himself. And I kind of already talked about this at length the last time that Chris posted a recent physique update post-official retirement announcement. Just the fact that he looked a little bit downsized and kind of really solidifying in a lot of the fans' minds that this retirement it's happening, it's permanent, it is a thing, and he's no longer training to be Mr. Olympia. He's still training. It sounds like from reading his caption, he's still living the lifestyle, eating well. I'm assuming he's in kind of like a health phase of his life right now, though, so he's probably not doing nearly the amount of stuff he was doing, when he was prepping for the Olympia. But honestly, I think it's just kind of an interesting to document Chris Bumstead's post-career physique. And honestly, he's still extremely impressive. This is still like an A-tier, everybody would want to look like this physique. It's only been a few months. But I think you are beginning to see just a little bit more of that. This is a different Chris Bumstead in these physique updates. This is no longer an actively defending Olympia champ. And even though, like I said, it's still a A-tier physique that is better than almost anybody, I feel like you are just starting to see a little bit more in these updates, especially as he posts like more of his life and his family and his home life in these updates. You're starting a little bit see more of Chris the person, the civilian, if you will, and he's starting to become more of that than Chris the Mr. Olympia. And I think it's going to be a very interesting thing to follow as Chris really deepens into his retirement, what his physique starts to look like. And I'm sure still, like you can see in this physique update, he still looks crazy. He'll still serve as an inspiration for a lot of people, but I am very interested to see what it looks like as he gets deeper into retirement and further away from the stage. What his career, what his influence, what his physique, what all of that starts to look like outside of competing. Because he is the biggest thing that the bodybuilding industry has had in a very long time. And another thing that I wonder about, like, obviously he's got all these businesses going. He's very successful within the bodybuilding realm when it comes to, Gymshark or supplements. He's already got that going, but I kind of wonder, so many people compared him to Arnold throughout his career. The impact that Arnold had on bodybuilding was kind of similar to what Chris has done with his impact for classic physique, his popularity, his appeal. I kind of wonder if he would follow in similar footsteps to Arnold. Is he going to start doing movies? Is he going to go Hollywood? Is he going to start acting? Is he going to have like some really big, ambitious, mainstream pursuits outside of being really successful within the bodybuilding industry as far as supplement companies or clothing brands or whatever? Is he going to reach that next level like Arnold did? And maybe as we see his physique transform, maybe it transforms with that goal in mind, with that purpose of maybe going to Hollywood, something of that nature. I highly doubt that Chris has any political ambitions like Arnold did. But maybe we see a Chris Bumstead classic, like a big classic physique competition that Chris becomes the promoter of. I mean, one of the first things that Arnold did when he left bodybuilding, he started to become a promoter for the Mr. World and Mr. Olympia. Eventually became the Arnold Classic. Maybe we see Chris do that. So I'm very fascinated to see what Chris chooses to do post-retirement. Because I feel like he's already kind of followed in Arnold's footsteps a little bit, obviously from the impact standpoint, but this very end of his career, this documentary that he announced that he's doing, that's being done about him, Pumping Iron, Arnold's documentary, came out right when Arnold left bodybuilding. That Olympia in 75, that was his last Olympia until 80. And that Pumping Iron documentary kind of propelled Arnold a little bit more into the zeitgeist, I guess. And then from there started to do more acting. So I don't know, just a little bit of interesting food for thought to chew on when you're seeing these updates from Chris, this family life stuff, this post-retirement stuff. What do you guys think the future is going to look like for Chris going forward? Because without a doubt, his impact as a competitor has been made, and I'm very curious what his impact beyond that in the future will be. Just keep in mind, he's extremely young. He's only 29. And I guess, again, another very interesting parallel with Arnold is Arnold was 28 in pumping iron. So they were right around the same age when they left competing. And then keep in mind, Arnold came back 5 years later, so he was, 33, 34, when Arnold came back in 1980 and then won another Olympia title. So thinking about a Chris Bumstead comeback, you can think about it in that context too. It's not that unlikely. And you think about guys like Lou Ferrigno that came back, 20 years after the fact, competed in the 70s, came back in the 90s and competed at the Olympia. So my point is just with Chris, when I think about his retirement, I just think his story is not yet done. And there's still big things that Chris could potentially still do that are very impactful. Now, next up in the news, we got a couple new physique updates from Derek Lunsford. And we are now under 7 weeks out from the 2025 Arnold Classic. I think right now would be about 6.5. So you got an abs and thighs from Derek, and also most muscular, and I believe he's with his mom in this physique update here. Now, Derek has talked a lot about how he really intends to win this show. We now know that Derek is working with Chris Aceto. We know he's got a bit of a chip on his shoulder, and we're probably looking forward to seeing a new version of Derek not working with Hani Rambod. What's that going to look like? To me, I think it already looks like Derek has a little bit of a different strategy for this show. I feel like in the updates that we've seen from Derek so far, including this one, because again, we're getting pretty close to crunch time here. We're almost at the 6-week out mark. To me, it looks like Derek is bringing a little bit of a bigger, fuller package, or that's what he's shooting for. To me, he looks a lot rounder. He looks thicker. Something to me looks different from a size standpoint. And whether or not that proves to be an effective strategy, I guess remains to be seen. But just something about the updates with Derek seemed different to me. He's not as crazy peeled, I feel like, as we're used to seeing him at 6 to 7 weeks out. It just looks different. And maybe you guys disagree. Maybe you have a different opinion than I do. And I'm very curious to hear that in the comments down below. But when I look at these updates from Derek, to me it looks like a different Derek. And whether that is a different strategy or just a result of him having a different coach. And again, he's been working with Chris for I think more than half the prep now. But in addition to that, I also saw, like I said before, I try to really follow some of the Brazilian bodybuilding pages because there's always a lot of interesting stuff going on the Brazilian front. Brazil seems to be a very hotbed for bodybuilding. And one thing that I did see on Brazil Bodybuilding News, if I'm reading the translated post correctly, there is a Brazilian trainer named Fabricio Pichalik that is going to be the new trainer of Derek. So Chris Aceto is still working with him. If I'm interpreting this post correctly, Chris is still working with him as his actual coach, and then Fabricio is going to be like his weight training him through his workouts. So this was just announced today, and I did see Derek actually comment on this post, seeming to confirm what it said. So that appears to be Derek's strategy for the Arnold Classic, new coach Chris Aceto, and new trainer being Fabricio. So there is a distinction between the two. I don't think that this Fabricio guy has anything to do with the diet or the gear or whatever. I think it's just strictly training from what I understand from this post. Now, next up in the news, I don't know if you guys caught this video or not from Wesley Vissers. This was 2 days ago, but he had a lot of interesting things to say in this video. One of them being that he's going to go into a bit of a shadow mode for this Arnold Classic prep. He talked about how for the Olympia prep, he posted a ton of physique updates going into it, and he looked really impressive in a lot of those Instagram updates. And then he felt like that led to an ultimately disappointing result for him and his fans. So he said as it gets closer to the Arnold, he's going to be posting less and less physique updates. But he also said in this video that he is putting a serious focus on his legs. And he specifically said in this video, clip this part, talk about it, play it after the Arnold. And remember that I said this, my legs will 100% be improved. And that's been a big topic of conversation, especially with this kind of budding rivalry that seems to be him and Mike Sommerfeld. Mike obviously has tremendous legs. They don't seem to be a weakness for him at all, whereas with Wesley, that's kind of his Achilles heel. And he also kind of answers the question, because this is one thing that I pointed out as we did start to see more updates from Wesley over the past few weeks. We hadn't seen anything of his legs, and he specifically says in this video The first time that you see his legs again will be on stage at the Arnold. So it sounds like we're not going to see the lower body at all going into the show until he actually steps on stage. And then Wesley also said he still sees himself as the favorite to win the Arnold this year, even though Mike Sommerfeld was at, second at the Olympia, placed much higher than Wesley. He said he's the defending champ. He still sees himself as the favorite, and he is the top one contender to win the Arnold this year. Now, I am really glad that Wesley acknowledged that he still needs to bring up his legs quite a bit. I think that is the main difference between him and Mike Sommerfeld. And that's, like I said, it's kind of Wesley's Achilles heel, because upper body-wise, one of the best in the world without a doubt. And I'll say this about Wesley too. You know, one of the reasons why I was so excited when Wesley won the Arnold is, well, for one, it was very unexpected. He beat the runner-up at the Olympia, who was Ramon Dino. But number two, Wesley is like a larger-than-life personality. We talked about kind of how him and Chris have a comparable height, a comparable structure. They're both taller guys. But Wesley is a very good speaker. And when I say larger than life, you know, a lot of times when you meet a pro bodybuilder, for example, a lot of times they seem maybe smaller in person because they're shorter than you expected or whatever. Wesley is like one of the few guys that I met that in person was bigger than I expected. He surprised me in person. And I'd say really the only guys that I've thought that about, because I've met pretty much everybody. I thought that about Big Ramy when I met Big Ramy for the first time. I thought that about Wesley. And the first time that I ever saw Cedric McMillan backstage at the Arnold, like, it might have been 15 years ago now. Maybe 12, 13 years, somewhere around there. But the first time I saw Cedric backstage, he was one of those guys that I was like, wow, this guy's huge. Evan Centopani is another one. But very rarely does a guy like have that impression, oh, he's bigger than I expected, because you go into it obviously expecting them to be really impressive. But Wesley's one of those guys that has that larger than life type of physique, and if he can bring up the legs, I feel like it's gonna be big for him. Because like I've talked about, I think Chris Bumstead has really big shoes to fill. And the next guy that comes in and takes his place, I hope is a larger than life personality. And I think Wesley has a lot of those characteristics where he could be, if he won the Olympia, he could be that next big name. And I don't know Mike as well. I know Terrence a little bit. Terrence is a really good guy too. I don't know Ramon as well. I've only talked to him like once or twice. But I'd say of the guys that are kind of in a position to potentially be one of the next winners of the Classic Physique Olympia, Terrence, Ramon, Mike, Wesley maybe not in that conversation based on the Olympia placing, but based on the Arnold Classic. I'd say I've talked to Terrence and Wesley the most. And those are two of the guys that I'm really rooting for to be the future. Actually, Urs, too. I don't know why I'm leaving Urs out of this conversation. Urs is a fantastic dude as well, and I've talked to him quite a bit. But like with open bodybuilding, when we've had all these different champions over the past few years, we talked a lot about how there's also a certain degree of how good of an ambassador are you for that title. Obviously, the most important thing is that the best physique wins on that day. I think we all agree on that. But there is a certain degree of what do you do with that title? I mean, I know, with Ramy, a lot of people were upset that Ramy wasn't very available to the fans. He didn't do a lot of appearances, etc. Same thing with Hadi Chupin. He was kind of limited in the amount of appearances he could make based on his location. And then not being able to speak English very well was like another big thing. So there is there's an X factor in there. And that's the X factor that I think made Chris so popular, is he had the ability to really interact with his fans and reach a large audience. He did a lot of appearances. He was a good ambassador. So obviously the most important thing for the Classic Physique Olympia, best physique wins. But I think there is also that element of, if you're going to completely fill the shoes of Chris, you have to have that X factor as well to be an ambassador for that title and continue kind of in Chris's footsteps, the legacy that he started. I think Wesley would do a good job of that. I think Urs would do a good job of that. I think Terrence would do a job of that. I'm not saying that I think Mike couldn't do that. I just don't know him as well. So kind of like how in the last video I said, one of the big things I'm thinking about with 2025, when it comes to open bodybuilding, I'm really thinking about who's the next big superstar in open, because we got so many young guys that are really gunning to become a top guy. But the other thing that I'm thinking about for 2025 is certainly Classic Physique, the Classic Physique Vacant Olympia title. And who is going to be the guy that is capable of filling Chris's shoes? Maybe somebody wins, has a really good physique, but can somebody win, have a great physique, the best physique on the stage that day, and also have a personality to fill the void that Chris left? Will we get both of those things at the Olympia this year is really the big question that I'm looking at. So as we start to see some of these top guys compete, as we're going to see Terrence in Pittsburgh, we're going to see Wesley and Mike at the Arnold, I'm also kind of looking at their YouTube videos, their charisma, and just seeing, does it really match Chris? And obviously that's not really something that the judges are considering when they're judging these guys' physique, but just from a fan perspective, it's something I've been thinking about. And I think the final story that I'll talk about today, I wanted to show the only recent physique update from Patrick Moore that we've really gotten since the announcement that he's also working with Chris Aceto for the Arnold Classic prep. I've been a huge fan of Patrick's physique for a long time, and I want to see him do really well at this Arnold Classic. I know I haven't talked about him as much, and the truth is that's just been because in recent years he's really been pretty hit or miss. The last time he did the Arnold in 2023, he was 10th place. So he would be 7 weeks out in this update, and I think, obviously they're not showing the legs. The legs has obviously been a big point of, kind of similar to Wesley, kind of a big point of criticism for him as well. But I just wanted to include this physique update, even though it's a couple days old, because I haven't talked as much about Patrick, but still, he's a guy that I'm rooting for. He's a great guy. I've loved his physique since that top 10 Olympia placing in 2019. He's always been a guy that I thought really brought something different to open bodybuilding, and I hope to see him do well here. But who knows? So that's going to wrap it up for the video today, guys. I hope you did, in fact, enjoy it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, click that bell notification icon if you have not already. And as always, I love you guys, appreciate you guys. Nick Strength and Power, signing out. All right, guys, don't forget to click that like button and subscribe to this channel if you enjoy the content. Also, check out my Instagram at NickStrengthPower. My Facebook page, which is simply Nick Strength and Power. My secondary YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Vlogs, for vlogs and bonus content that you will not see on this channel. And consider subscribing to my third YouTube channel, Nick Strength and Pokemon, which is all things Pokemon and trading card games, completely unrelated to this channel. So if you're into that, give that one a look. And all links to merchandise and social media will be in the description box below. If you guys want a Nick Strength and Power t-shirt, that will be in the Shopify link below. Have a great day.